guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Now today's video, guys, we're going to be ranking all of the Spider-Man movies, including Into the Spider-Verse and the two Venom movies, Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage. But first, I of course have some announcements to make. So first of all, the first obvious thing that happened is that I did get my new gaming chair, which is a lot more comfortable and a definitely better design for gaming and making my videos. Definitely looks a lot better aesthetically and very, very comfortable. So I did get that for Christmas, so I hope you all had a great Christmas as well. Unfortunately, I did not get my webcam, so I think I'm going to lay aside doing the reaction video until maybe around my birthday or whenever I do decide to purchase my webcam. So, yeah, sorry about that, but I would like to make an announcement about the anniversary. So, yeah, obviously my channel has been existing since December of 2015 when I started watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. And once I started seeing all these influencers on YouTube and watching these videos specifically about horror, I wanted to get my opinion out there, and that's where I started my YouTube channel, mainly on horror, especially Michael Myers and Jason. That's all that was in my head when I was making these videos, was Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, all those slasher movies and stuff like that. So I wanted to get my opinion out there, and I started off by making, who would win and stuff like that. And I didn't think that I was going to get very far. I thought it was only going to, it was only a matter of time before I ran out of ideas for these horror videos, until I started getting interest in other things, watching other different videos. That's when I started doing like card trick tutorials and stuff like that. And I just went on and on and on and on, making more and more videos. And now I just kind of make whatever I want. But that's where I started. And my first video that I made was actually back in, I believe it was April or May of 2016. And I did several takes of a Michael Myers versus Jason video, but I was not satisfied with that video. So I made a couple of other videos. Again, I deleted them. And it wasn't until December of 2016 where I made my oldest video that is still up currently, which is my ranking of the Halloween films. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey, and I do want to thank everybody who has been along the ride to help me get to where I am right now. I haven't made a dime on YouTube, but what I love about YouTube is that I just enjoy making these videos and getting my opinion out there and talking and having conversations with all these people. Eventually, I will get to the point where I probably will be able to make money on YouTube, and when that does happen, of course, I'm going to take the advantage of making money off of YouTube. I already do have a job, but yeah, YouTube, it's just something that is really, really enjoyable, and despite having so many different things that I have to do in life, I still really do enjoy YouTube. I don't see it as a burden at all, and I really do thank you all for supporting the channel. It's been a long journey, and we are now at over 70,000 views. So hopefully within the next year, we can make it to 100,000 views. That would be absolutely incredible. My most popular video is already at 16,000 views, so that's already a really big accomplishment for me. So yeah, I didn't want to go on a huge, long conversation about that, but it's been a while since I've done a video where I just sit here and I talk to you and you get to see me face to face instead of, through the computer. All you get to hear is my voice. But yeah, I did get the new gaming chair, lots of other presents, so I really do hope that you guys all enjoyed your Christmas. And the new year is almost coming. I'm not going to say it's going to be a huge, fresh new year. I think there's still going to be some things that are maybe lingering around in 2022. So I'm not super excited for the new year, but it's always nice to just have, a new number to say 2022, get away from 2021. So yeah, I think that's all the announcements that I have to say, other than as far as future content goes, I am thinking about some new rankings. I would like to rent Ghostbusters Afterlife so I can see that and rank all of the Ghostbusters movies, as well as the Sandlot movies, which I'd like to rewatch over Christmas break. And then obviously going into January, I know this is getting a little bit ahead of myself, I'm going to see the new Scream movie as soon as possible, and I'm going to be making a new Scream ranking as well, which will get even longer for the ranking, which is a good thing. I didn't really like when it was just 4 Scream movies that you had to rank, because it became fairly obvious what it was. But with Scream 5, it might be a little bit less obvious now. So yeah, make sure you join the Discord. Link will always be in the description of every video. and read the community post so that you can stay updated with any potential future content. Other than that, let's get on to the rankings, starting at the number 11th spot. Number 11, and unfortunately I do not have the DVD copy for all of these movies. In fact, I'm already regretting getting rid of the 2 Amazing Spider-Man DVDs that I got rid of at a rummage sale a couple of months ago. But at number 11 is going to be The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to put this movie at least to the number 10 spot and put Into the Spider-Verse here. Just because and then I thought, I don't want to be too judgmental on Into the Spider-Verse for not really being related much to the rest of the Spider-Man movies. It's just kind of a fun, like, CGI Spider-Man movie. But I didn't want to be too harsh, and I think Into the Spider-Verse is a pretty decent Spider-Man movie, so I put The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at this spot. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think the reason why it wasn't too successful is I believe they had planned to make The Amazing Spider-Man 3, which was probably going to come out somewhere in 2016, likely. But then they decided that they were not going to make The Amazing Spider-Man 3, so they had to jam-pack everything into The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that's where we got all the problems that happened in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Suffered some similar issues to Spider-Man 3 in that there were just too many characters to deal with, and they were really trying to rush it so that they could get, all the characters' screen time and, their plot lines and stuff like that. So, in the first half of the movie, you have this short time where you have Rhino, who they fit in here, which, honestly, until a couple of weeks ago, I didn't even know that Rhino was in this movie because it was so rushed, and I didn't even realize that it was Rhino at the time in this movie. But all Rhino does in the movie is screams like an absolute maniac while he's driving his car, and I'm pretty sure he's never in the suit in the movie, if I stand correctly. Even if that is the case, I don't think it really helps at all. All Rhino does in this movie is scream like an absolute maniac, and I wish they could have done that better. I think with Amazing Spider-Man 3, they could have fit in a spot for Rhino and gave him a little bit more time instead of just absolutely rushing it. So that's all he does in this movie. And then we have Electro and Green Goblin. And I don't think that the Green Goblin storyline that they went with The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was terrible. It's just all Green Goblin did was, at the second half of the movie, is they built him up they built him up significantly, and then at the second half of the movie, they kind of forgot about him and went into Electro's storyline, and then it wasn't until Electro was fighting Spider-Man that Green Goblin comes in so that he can just kill Gwen Stacy, and that's all he really does. He just goes in there to kill Gwen Stacy so that we can have that sequence where Gwen Stacy dies, and it's a very heartbreaking sequence. That's all he really does. He's just kind of there to finish the job, basically, which is a shame because they developed him throughout the first half of the movie. We got a lot of screen time with him, but when he actually becomes Green Goblin, all he is there to do is just kill Gwen Stacy and leave Electro to finish the job with Spider-Man. And I didn't even think Electro was that good in this movie. In fact, I think Electro was a lot better in No Way Home, which is surprising because Electro was supposed to be kind of one of the main villains in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but they actually did him better in No Way Home than they did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Whereas in No Way Home, he wasn't supposed to be the main villain. He was just supposed to be one of the many villains that they were all going to kind of share a certain amount of screen time with. So I thought Electro was also subpar in this movie. And I think there's still emotion that is still there, just as in the first Amazing Spider-Man. But it's unfortunate for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 because it had too much to carry, and it could not successfully fulfill everything in the amount of time that it got. They just needed another Amazing Spider-Man movie if they were to fulfill everything nicely. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it goes at the number 11 spot. At the number 10 spot is going to be Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And I just saw this in theaters 2 months ago. Saw it, I think, the same weekend that it came out. And I was a little bit pumped up. Some people got me a little bit excited. They said, Carnage was a big part of the comics for Venom, which I did not previously know. So they said, this is going to be a big villain, and that this theoretically should be a pretty good, pretty exciting movie. but the movie was very, very disappointing. And the number one problem with this movie that is extremely obvious is that the movie is an hour and a half long. I don't know what they were thinking in making the screen time one hour and a half long, but that is just something that you do not do in a Marvel movie. Any other franchise except for maybe DC, any like non-superhero franchise or non-Star Wars franchise, you know what franchises like to have long movies. You can have an hour and a half long movie. But with Marvel, you can't do that. And this movie shows that. This movie is an hour and a half long, briefly. And they just had to rush through everything. And it made the movie ultimately very disappointing because Carnage didn't get to do all the carnage that we wanted. He didn't rip people's heads off throughout the movie. He didn't do any of that, which is a damn shame. The first half of the movie was okay. Obviously, we got a lot of humor in this movie between Venom and Eddie Brock. Through the first half of this movie, we learn quite a bit about Carnage in the first half of the movie. I think Carnage's partner at the beginning of the movie, she's kind of a throwaway, to be honest. I don't think they were trying to go anywhere with her anyway. So I'm not really gonna, mention that. But in the second half of the movie, it really, really starts to rush, and we only get like a small final battle sequence between Carnage and Venom. It's very brief, and there's not a lot of carnage, there's not a lot of good action. So the movie is just very, very disappointed, extremely rushed. If this movie would have had even just at least another 30 minutes, I would appreciate if this movie was at least 2 hours and 15 minutes to 2 hours and 30 minutes long. But if the movie even had just an extra 30 minutes, maybe we could have gotten a little bit more screen time with Carnage of him ripping people's heads off. You know what I mean? Just carnage, him killing people, instead of just this one little scene where he turns into the Carnage symbiote, and then he fights off Venom, and it didn't even feel like a lived up final battle sequence. It was just it was so rushed. It didn't. I thought, wait, we're already at the ending of the movie. Like they're Venom and Eddie Brock are on the beach together, and I'm thinking, wait, we're already at the end of the movie? Yeah, just very disappointing. This movie would have had more screen time. Also, if it wasn't PG-13, which I know Marvel, they like to keep it at a PG-13 rating because they like to have a big audience, and if they keep it at PG-13, that it can allow more children to come into the movie. But I think they should have, took their chances, added a little bit more killing and carnage into the movie. And even if they got a rated R score, I mean, I wouldn't be as disappointed. So yeah, this movie, incredibly rushed, very disappointing. I still got some enjoyment out of it. I think it was still pretty funny between Eddie Brock and Venom, just very rushed, very disappointing. Ultimately did not satisfy me with the carnage that it promised me. Number 9 is going to be Into the Spider-Verse, and this is a very unfortunate for Into the Spider-Verse. And it really just boils down to the fact that Into the Spider-Verse isn't really pertained to the Marvel franchise in any way. It's just kind of a fun CGI Spider-Man movie that's fun. It's more designed for kids, obviously, and stuff like that. But overall, I think it's still a very decent Spider-Man movie if we are to incorporate it into this Spider-Man franchise. Anything with the multiverse, I really do enjoy, and I think they did a good job in that, having all these different Spider-Mans from different universes. They all share their unique personalities, and they all get their moment in the spotlight in this movie. I really did enjoy. The two villains in this movie, they're all right. Kingpin, and then I believe it was like the Lady Dr. Octopus. I think they're fun villains. I think there's a lot of fun, fighting sequences, obviously. And this movie is surprisingly very, very humorous. It's not like a bunch of kids' jokes or anything. It does got some adult jokes in there, and some jokes that, adults would understand. Not really any, sexual or jokes that aren't for children, but jokes that can also appeal to adults and not just children, bodily humor jokes or something like that. So, yeah, very enjoyable movie overall. It's just the only reason it goes up to number 9 is because I would feel really strange, and I feel like I would be overestimating this movie if I put it above any of the other movies before it. And that just really comes down to the fact that it's a CGI Spider-Man movie. But overall, I think it's really fun and enjoyable, and I certainly would rewatch it. And I'm excited for Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie. I forget what it's called, but yeah, let's get on to the next spot. Number 8 is Far From Home, and initially when I first watched this movie, I did get a kick out of it. I really, really loved Far From Home, and it definitely got me excited for No Way Home with the ending scene where we see Jameson on the TV screen. That was very, very exciting. So it left me off on a good note, but over the past few years, I've realized some of the faults that come into this movie. So I guess I'll talk about the good and the bad about this movie. There are lots of good things about this movie. I think overall, as a Spider-Man movie, I think it does the job. It does a good job. Spider-Man's performance is still really great. The humor is still there. Everything is still there. I just think that the main issues, and I think the only issues really, are in the villain Mysterio. They once again go for the cliche plotline of the villain has jealousy for Tony Stark, and that's why he basically wants to get revenge on him or whatever. But in this movie, it doesn't make any sense at all, because Spider-Man is dead, and yet he still wants to get some kind of revenge. But why does he want to do it on Spider-Man? Does he want to ruin his career or something like that? I mean, I guess you could argue that, but it just doesn't really make sense. So I think overall the storyline doesn't really make that sense. It definitely got me. It was definitely like a surprising plot twist when I realized that Mysterio was in fact a villain. I thought that the Elementals were going to be like the next big villains coming into Phase 4 for everybody. But when they turn it around and they made Mysterio, it turns out he was just putting it all in a simulation, and his plan is to ruin Spider-Man's career. I thought, wow, I honestly did not see that coming the first time. So I think that's why I enjoyed it quite a lot the first time, is when I realized that Mysterio was actually faking all of this. For the rest of the movie, I was just cheering for Spider-Man, like, yes, get that B. Expose him or whatever. So yeah, I was constantly just getting mad at Mysterio for doing all this trickery in this play, but I really, really enjoyed that. The whole trickery with the drones and stuff like that, the mind games between Mysterio and Spider-Man in this movie, I really, really did enjoy that. Just my main problem is the storyline and the excuses for bringing in Mysterio for this movie. It felt a bit cheap. So yeah, that's why it goes at the number 8 spot. Let's get on to the next Spider-Man movie. At number 7 is Spider-Man 3, and I know a lot of people would probably have this movie at the bottom of their list, but for me, I always enjoyed Spider-Man 3 as a kid, and I think that was just because as a kid, I really loved how they had all these different villains in it, especially when you got to the ending of the movie where you have this big battle sequence between all these different characters, Green Goblin, Spider-Man, Venom, Sandman, all these different characters fighting with each other. I always enjoyed that as a kid. This was the one that I would watch the most when I was a kid. I grew up watching the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, so sorry, I might have a little bias with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, but I grew up watching them, and Spider-Man 3 was the one that I was always attached to. I would occasionally rewatch Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man, but this was the one that I really enjoyed the most. But obviously, as I've matured, I have noticed the faults that are in this movie. One fault that I know a lot of people have with this movie that I completely disagree with is when Spider-Man gets attached to the symbiote and he's got all this weird behavior. I don't know why people hate that. I think it is freaking hilarious. By the way, any other Bully Maguire meme fans, I am there for you. I absolutely love the Bully Maguire memes. I think they're extremely funny, especially the ones where he's in the symbiote form and he's acting all wacky and passive-aggressive. I really love that. But also when he's having one-liners in the other Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies that are really awkward, I love that. I'm not going to complain at all like that. It gives me nostalgia, that like awkward feel of the early 2000s, those awkward lines that they had. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was funny. It maybe makes the movie feel a bit outdated, but I think it is absolutely funny. I love when Spider-Man goes like in emo Parker and he's getting angry at everybody. I think it's a funny way to show you just how the symbiote can change behavior. And you really do get to see that when he goes into the bar or whatever, the restaurant with Gwen Stacy. I think it's Gwen Stacy, but it looks like Gwen Stacy. I'm not sure if her name was Gwen. I honestly can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was Gwen. Correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, he goes into the restaurant with Gwen Stacy. Mary Jane is working there because she lost her job at the theater, and he tries to make her jealous and everything, and he ends up just coming off as rude and stuff like that. It really emphasizes, just how much the symbiote can change your behavior and turn you into this evil guy. But another thing that I liked about this movie is that in Spider-Man 2, we got a little bit more information as far as the killing of Uncle Ben. But in this one, obviously with the introduction of Sandman, we learned a little bit more about the killing of Uncle Ben. And what I like about this movie is that because of, the revelations with the introduction of Sandman in this movie, Spider-Man in this movie feels like he needs to kill this guy, and he needs to get revenge. But what I really like is how Uncle May still kind of forgives him in a certain way, despite him killing Uncle Ben. And he finally realizes, after attempting to kill him throughout the movie, that he just needs to let it go, and sometimes you need to forgive people for what they did. Once he reveals the true story, finally reveals what actually happened fully, on him is not good for me nor you, and maybe I should forgive you in a certain way. I don't think it's like the best excuse, it's not the best excuse for Sandman to kill Uncle Parker. His daughter is suffering through cancer, so he needs to steal money or whatever. I know it was like an accident, apparently, that he killed Uncle Ben. I just think that the storyline, it feels a little bit cliche. Like you're sympathetic for the villain because he was just trying to do it for a good cause that nobody really knowed about. It just feels a little bit cliche, but other than that, once we got to the final battle sequence where we have Sandman, Venom, Green Goblin, and Spider-Man, I really did enjoy it. The only problem is I think Venom needed a little bit more screen time fighting with Spider-Man. We only got this small battle between the two. It was mainly Spider-Man against Sandman for the most part. And also I agree with other people on the fact that whenever they would show Topher something, I can't remember his last name. Whenever they would show the actor who played Venom in this movie, whenever he would take off the mask and they'd show his face, I do agree it was really cringy, and it emphasized how semi outdated the CGI is as well. I don't think it was absolutely terrible, but it kind of emphasized that the CGI is getting a bit outdated. So yeah, I would agree with people on that part. But overall, I think the final battle sequence was pretty satisfying. Really did enjoy it, especially when we have Green Goblin and Spider-Man finally coming back together, and finally all their heat through the past 3 movies is over, and they finally get together to fight off these two. I think it's very, very satisfying. A few problems that I do have with this movie, however. I do agree that this movie does have a little bit too much to handle, just like in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Obviously, as most people know, Sam Raimi wanted, I believe, Sandman, and he didn't really get the story of Venom, but another dude wanted Venom in the movie, so eventually they decided to just put the two together, and that's how they got Spider-Man 3. So it's very unfortunate, just like for Amazing Spider-Man 2, that they just had too many villains and too many plot lines to deal with in this movie, that made it very difficult to fulfill everything, especially Sandman's plotline, but even some parts of Venom's plotline and Green Goblin's plotline. It felt a little bit cheap, just, making Green Goblin forget everything so that we can focus on Sandman and Venom. They're obviously trying to fit in some things there so that other characters can have their time and whatever. So yeah, time management and fulfilling everything was very difficult when you have Green Goblin, Venom, and Sandman to deal with in this movie. I understand it was very difficult. I think that if they hadn't have done this and they would have made Spider-Man 4 and they would have fitted in either Sandman or Venom into that movie, this movie would probably been a lot better as far as time management, and giving every villain their fair share would have been certainly a lot better. So, yeah, Spider-Man 3, I do realize the faults, but I still do think it is a solid Spider-Man movie and a decent trilogy ender to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. So, yeah, enough talking about Spider-Man 3. Number 6 is Venom, which I think is a really, really fun movie. I don't really have a whole lot of complaints about Venom. The humor's there. Lots of fun, obviously, in the movie. And I think Riot is actually, like, you wouldn't expect this, but turns out to be a better villain than Carnage because he gets more screen time. He gets to battle Venom even more, cause more destruction. So it's surprising that that Riot, he wasn't supposed to be the huge villain, turns out to be like a slightly better villain than Carnage, just because they were better on making the screen time longer so that they could have time for Riot to do all these crazy things, going on the streets, causing destruction, fighting against Venom and stuff like that. So yeah, I think Venom is a very fun movie. I don't think it's trying to go over the top. It's not trying to be the best Marvel movie. And I sometimes do like those Marvel movies a little bit better than the ones that try to go over the top. Just because it just feels fun, charming. You're not like on your seat the whole time. You're just enjoying the movie, enjoying the humor, enjoying the battle sequence. So yeah, Venom, very fun movie. Not really any complaints except for when Riot and Venom are fighting each other. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell. I know a lot of other people have said this. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell which is which. That's all I can say. That's a very, very minor thing to say. But overall, Venom, it goes in the middle of the list just because it's a perfectly average Spider-Man movie, I guess you could say. It's a Venom movie, but we're putting it in the Spider-Man franchise, so we're going to be calling it a Spider-Man movie. But yeah, it's overall a decent MCU movie that's not trying to go over the top. It fulfills all the things that you like to see. The humor, the battle sequences, how good the villain is, how good the character is. They fill in all those spots, and they got nothing more and nothing less bad or good to say about them. So Venom goes at the number 6 spot. Number 5 is The Amazing Spider-Man. And I think if I would have made this list a couple of years back, The Amazing Spider-Man, both of The Amazing Spider-Mans probably would have been at the ending of my list. But over the years, I've learned to give a little bit more respect to The Amazing Spider-Mans. Accepting the fact that, maybe I'm a little bit too biased with the Sam Raimi films. I still love them a lot better than The Amazing Spider-Mans. But I learned to be a little bit more fair with the Amazing Spider-Man movies and understand that there are some good elements to the Amazing Spider-Man. The relationship between Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, or I should say Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy in this movie, is really, really strong. You feel like they're a couple, with the conversations, the perfectly natural conversations that they have with each other and stuff like that. You can really, really feel that. Lizard as a villain, I think he's alright. I don't think he's anything fascinating. I think that's the main reason why I didn't really put this movie any higher, is that I just don't think Lizard is all that too amazing of a villain. And Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker and Spider-Man, I think his suit looks amazing. I think he plays a very good Spider-Man, but he doesn't play a really good Peter Parker. And I think that just boils down to the fact that because Spider-Man 4 never happened and they went to The Amazing Spider-Man, they had to go for like a different plot line. And so they went off with like his parents and why his parents left him and how that impacted him or whatever. And I think that's why it brought him down as far as Andrew Garfield not being the best Peter Parker out of the three: Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire. So overall, I think The Amazing Spider-Man is a pretty decent Spider-Man movie. I would have always loved to see Spider-Man 4 over The Amazing Spider-Man, however. But at least we got something. It's better than nothing. So yeah, The Amazing Spider-Man goes at the number 5 spot. Number 4 is Homecoming. And you'll see this in my MCU tier list, but Homecoming is a movie that I had a lot of doubt for when it came out. I thought this was just going to be a very cheap, all jokes, but no, like, good battle sequences. I thought that's what this movie was going to be. I thought it was going to be a one and done as well. I really didn't I didn't really picture Spider-Man getting his own movie after his little performance in Civil War. But then they made Homecoming, and I said, all right, let's go watch it. And I really, really enjoyed Homecoming. It has a different kind of humor from the rest of the MCU movies, which I do like. And it also kicks off the Spider-Man trilogy very, very well. Vulture is a really, really great villain. The thing that I like about Vulture is that he's not a villain who's trying to end the world, blow up the world, threaten to kill the universe or whatever. He's just a guy who thought that he had been done wrong, so he turns evil by stealing this alien technology and using it for bad things. He's not someone who's trying to just end the universe, you know. So he makes for a very, like, equivalent villain compared to Spider-Man, just because Spider-Man's just a 16-year-old teenage boy. So, you know, there's a good equivalence there in that Spider-Man's just a regular 16-year-old boy. He's not going against someone who's trying to end the world. He's just going against a guy who's kind of at the same spot with Spider-Man, except he's a villain and not a hero. And I think the icing on the cake is especially that scene where they're in the car together, and Vulture threatens to... You realize Vulture is the father of the girl that he's going to the homecoming dance with. And that moment was very, very surprising to me. But, you know, the icing on the cake is he threatens that if you do anything to her, I will kill you. And for being so small scale, right? That's something that would be big scale in another franchise. But in the MCU, that is incredibly small scale to everything else we've had in the MCU. But because these are two characters that are kind of like at the same spot, you can just feel the conflict between the two characters when he threatens Spider-Man that way, and they're in that car together one-on-one. You can just feel that conflict. And I think the director did a great job at making something so small scale in an MCU franchise feel like so much in Spider-Man Homecoming, because you have a regular teenage boy going against a regular villain who could be easily defeated by half or more than half of the other villains in the MCU. But because they're both equivalent, it doesn't feel small scale. You can feel that conflict, and I just really like what they did. I could go on and on about that car scene, but that is absolutely incredible what they did there. So Spider-Man Homecoming, it's a really, really enjoyable and rewatchable MCU movie. I love the humor in this movie. It certainly takes on a different humor from the other MCU movies. Yeah, I just think that this movie is really, really fun, especially because you're not dealing with adults in this movie. You're dealing with teenagers who are very reckless and immature and stuff like that, which makes it really, really fun and enjoyable. So yeah, I don't think there's much more to say. The only complaint I would say about this movie is, and they do better in No Way Home, is that in this Spider-Man trilogy, I don't really like how Spider-Man is kind of a follower of Iron Man. I never really liked that in the MCU Spider-Man franchises. I always loved Spider-Man just being kind of alone and making his decisions for himself, which they do fix that in Spider-Man No Way Home, and I'll talk about that there. But what I really liked about the Amazing Spider-Man and the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans is that he wasn't just following Tony Stark and getting all this advice from Tony Stark and his suits being made from Tony Stark. He didn't feel like Tony Stark 2.0, like he was going to replace Tony Stark when he retires. But in this one, that feels like the route that they're trying to go down, and luckily they didn't fully go down on it. So, yeah, other than that, Spider-Man Homecoming, a very, very enjoyable and rewatchable MCU movie. Number 3, and this may come as a little bit of a surprise to some of you, is going to be the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man. I always thought this one was a little bit overrated, and I don't think there's really a whole lot of issues to talk about in Spider-Man. Obviously, Green Goblin is a really great villain. His suit, I know a lot of people complain how it looks really, really bad. I would agree on that. But overall, Green Goblin as a villain is really, really great. we learn about Spider-Man, obviously, and his backstory in this movie. I absolutely love that. The only complaint I can have about this movie is this is the only movie where it kind of bothers me with the acting, that early 2000s acting that is a bit awkward at times and a bit outdated. I would agree that it's a bit awkward, but I'm glad that there's memes out for it because it's an absolute joy to my life watching Spider-Man memes and stuff like that. That's the only complaint that I can really make about this movie. Other than that, I just think that it's overrated, and that's why it goes at the number 3 spot. And number 2 is going to be Spider-Man No Way Home. And boy, walking out of that theater, I was satisfied on so many levels. If we're just going to talk about the regular Spider-Man, like just this Spider-Man, disregarding like the meme aspect to it for right now, I was satisfied on that level. I was very, very excited before this movie that the Sinister Six was coming into this movie. I really, really wanted to see them come back one more time for this movie, especially because we were disappointed twice when we didn't get Amazing Spider-Man 3 and Spider-Man 4. This movie was the thing that we all needed after those 2 disappointing years where we learned that, well, we're not going to be getting Spider-Man 4, we're not going to be getting the Amazing Spider-Man 3, which it's still a possibility that it could happen. But No Way Home was the redemption to that, bringing back the Sinister Six because of the multiverse. It really satisfied me on that level. And I do want to get into the meme so that I can just get it out of the way right now. Because Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire were in this movie, which I was really, really anticipating. I would have been disappointed if they weren't. Also, I don't think it would have made sense. I was very, very satisfied on the meme level because whenever Tobey Maguire talks in these Spider-Man movies, and especially when I was watching the movie, I thought, yes, that's a meme. And there were some one-liners in there that were like direct callbacks to the memes that people have been posting with Bully Maguire and stuff like that. And I said, yes, that thing is going to be clipped once this movie comes out on the DVD. So, yeah, they satisfied me on the humor and the memes level. I really, really loved that. I loved every moment that Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland were together in this movie. Really, really awesome, really funny. Every time Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield speak, it was just an absolute joy to see them on screen again, playing Spider-Man and not some other movie. Oh my god, I just absolutely loved it on a meme level. But if we're going back to the Spider-Man, talking about the core stuff, it satisfied me on that level too. And surprisingly didn't suffer from overflowing like the Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. You would think that because there are so many villains that they have to deal with in this movie, but because these villains have already been developed, they've been talked about, their backstories have already been revealed, they don't need to do that. All they need to do is put them on screen, have them fight against the 3 Spider-Mans. That's all you need to do. And I will say that they could have gave some of the villains a little bit more screen time, especially Sandman and Lizard. Those are the 2 main ones. But I'm glad that they put Electro further up there, considering he didn't do too good of a job in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But the 2 main ones were Green Goblin and Doc Ock, which I do appreciate quite a bit because they were always the 2 kind of main Spider-Man villains, if we're going back to the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. And obviously, Green Goblin was the star of the show, causing the main conflict, which was the fact that he killed Aunt May, and Aunt May said those famous lines from Ben Parker, "With great power comes great responsibility." And although it wasn't as emotional as Ben Parker's death, I could still feel it, and it definitely gave me a reminiscence of the Sam Raimi movies, and that's what caused the main conflict in the second half between Green Goblin and Spider-Man. And he's fighting off Green Goblin, and he's obviously anticipating to kill him. But Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, they make sure that he doesn't do that because they know that revenge is not the answer, and they stop him. And I really did like that. And it didn't feel like, with the problem that I had with Homecoming and Far From Home, it didn't feel like he was making all these decisions following Tony Stark with all of his decisions and stuff like that. In this movie, he was alone. He didn't have anybody to really help him. Yes, he got advice from Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in this movie. But ultimately, he was the one to make those big decisions. And that's what I really loved about these movies. Those decisions developed him from being just a regular teenage boy at the beginning of the movie to becoming a man who can make tough, good decisions, and it certainly ended Peter Parker's development satisfyingly at the end of this trilogy. So I'm excited to see Tom Holland appear more in the MCU as a fully developed character who has learned a lot from all these different characters, but ultimately he did have to make those hard decisions on his own, especially after Aunt May died. I do have a couple of problems with this movie. That being, I feel like their destination that they got to was cut short or a little bit cheap, with the fact that all they all that they had, like, it felt a little bit cheap, because how they got there was he basically messed up Doctor Strange's spell, and oh damn, well, now we've opened up all these multiverse portals and stuff like that, so now they're all piling in. It just felt a little bit cheap that this negligent, reckless teenage boy messed up Doctor Strange's spell, and that's how all this ruckus started. It just feels a little bit cheap that they did that. But at least the destination that they got to satisfied me on very greatly. I just wish that the build up to that was a little bit more satisfying than just, oh, he messes up his spell verse and it's causing all this ruckus. Just felt a little bit cheap. And I didn't really like when Spider-Man, like, put Doctor Strange away so that he could do all the work without Doctor Strange, telling him, no, stop what you're doing. I just thought it was a little bit strange. Like, I thought it was a little bit weird seeing a teenage boy, keep Doctor Strange in captivity for a little bit so that he could do all the dirty work. That probably wasn't the best solution compared to what Doctor Strange would have done. I just thought it was a little bit weird, but they had to make something work, and overall, I am pretty satisfied with this movie. So, Spider-Man No Way Home goes at the number 2 spot. And at number 1 is Spider-Man 2, and I think a lot of people would have mixed up the first Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. You could have either or at the number 1, but for me, it's Spider-Man 2 that goes at the number 1. And it really just comes down to the emotion is really, really felt in this movie. Especially those little conversations that Peter Parker has with Aunt May, and Peter Parker's like personality change, and then coming back. Oh my god, it is just so good. When I rewatched this a couple of weeks ago, because it had been a long time since I watched the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, I hadn't watched them until years back when I was just a little kid. I finally realized just how deep this movie really got. The one scene I really do want to talk about is when Peter Parker is talking to Aunt May, and he's talking about that night that Uncle Ben died, and he's talking about how Uncle Ben was the only person who made the right decision that day. And you can see just kind of the disappointment in Aunt May's face and the emotion in that scene after that small revelation. It was just really, really good. One of the best revelations that we got after Uncle Ben's death. Really, really great. And I do have to give this credit to all the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. That one, just Uncle Ben's death alone was kind of the main conflict for the rest of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And in this movie, we get that one revelation that is really, really emotional, and just a very, very powerful scene. So yeah, I wanted to give credit for Sam Raimi for the all three of the Spider-Man movies kind of being based off of Uncle Ben's death, and getting revelations out of Uncle Ben's death, and like lessons to be learned from them and stuff like that. It really does add to the development of the Spider-Man character. Additionally, obviously, halfway through the Spider-Man movie, I think, Peter Parker is obviously in so much stress that he loses his powers. And for about 30 minutes in the movie, he just decides to continue off of his life stress-free, not being Spider-Man anymore. And you see the effect that it has on the city, and he sees the effect that it has had on the city. And he finally, thinks through things, and he decides, you know what, it's right for me to, get back in that suit, do what I'm supposed to do, not give up, get through this, and he does get through this, and at the ending of the movie when he fights off Doc Ock. A really, really great battle sequence. I didn't even mention that Doc Ock is a really, really great villain. I think arguably one of the best villains. Not as good as Green Goblin, but certainly the second best villain in the Spider-Man franchise. Really, really great. He's not this necessarily super evil villain. He just, he was controlled by these arms that he created, and he can't do anything about it. They're now controlling him and forcing him to do this thing that he feels that he needs to do, which is creating this sun thing, whatever he was trying to do with that. So yeah, he's not necessarily an evil villain. He's just a broken villain who is under the control of these arms that he created. So yeah, I could ramble on and on all about Spider-Man 2 all day, but there are just so many great things emotionally, aesthetically about this movie, with the battle sequences. Very, very enjoyable. But Spider-Man 2, I think some people would definitely understand with me why Spider-Man 2 goes at the #1 spot. So I think I rambled on a little bit too much in this video, but overall, I think I did a pretty good job explaining why each one goes at their spot. So yeah, that will end the Spider-Man ranking. Stay tuned for all that future content. And hopefully I'll get this video out before the ending of the year. If not, I hope you all had a very great Christmas, and I hope you have a great new year. I'm not going to say it's going to be a fresh new year, but I hope you do enjoy having a new year to talk about 2022 instead of saying 2021 all the time. Yeah, join the Discord. Link will always be in the description of every video, and read the community posts so that you can stay updated with any potential future content or changes. So, other than that, like and subscribe, guys, and I'll see you next time.